We're in my garage because I haven't set up my studio yet. It'll still be in the garage, but you just won't be able to tell anymore. And I'm going through these boxes. In 2011, I left California, where I had been working as a high school history teacher, and looked for a teaching job in DC. And after a while, I moved there in the middle of school year, and after a while, I realized I just wasn't going to get a full-time teaching job. It just wasn't going to happen. I had always been interested in Capitol Hill, and that's where I went. I had heard that you could get a job as a legislative assistant. I figured that's where I would fit in. I knew things, right? I was wrong. I walked in and I thought to myself, I know how this works. This is easy. I've been here before. I've taught this. You know, I'm just a bill. You start as an idea and then somebody writes it down and then you pass it through. And as long as I understand that process, I'll get it. And I was wrong. So eventually, after being served enough humility, I went and had to find an internship. And since I'm from California, and since I love California, I figured why not work for the California delegation. Delegation is a word that refers to a group of people that have a common bond and are from a certain place, and in this case, California. So I went and I took 50 copies of my resume and I walked down the halls of Congress, which literally meant like going through security and walking up and down the halls of the Cannon House office building every day. And when I did, a bunch of the members from Northern California were on the same floor and on the same hallway. It turns out the members themselves were all buddies and would like hang out with each other on the House floor. So Mike Thompson, Doris Matsui, Lois Capps, and a bunch of others. Eventually, after handing out enough of my resumes, I sat down with somebody named Leah, and Leah was with Doris Matsui. I talked through my resume, and she said, well, we're actually looking for an intern. Can you start tomorrow? I said, sure. That started 8 months of working as an unpaid intern for Doris Matsui. While I was there, I worked as a staff assistant. Leah was the staff assistant, and then she got promoted. And then I started splitting the duties with my friend Daniel. And when he wasn't around, I did it. When I wasn't around, he did it. And we were basically in charge of running the front of the office, answering the phones, making sure that people got taken care of when they came in for meetings and things like that. Eventually, the office decided that they wanted to pay somebody to do it, and they hired Daniel full-time. So since I was looking for a paying job and couldn't work indefinitely for free, I left and I went and I actually worked for this guy. This is Senator Tom Harkin, formerly the junior senator from Iowa. And, you know, junior's a relative term. Tom, I don't know how old he was here, but he was not that junior. He got elected to Congress after Watergate. Senator Harkin was a congressional staffer who went to Vietnam and saw the terrible conditions that American soldiers were treating the Vietnamese prisoners, went back, helped create a lot of exposure for this issue. It led to hearings, it led to a lot of people getting in some serious trouble, and most importantly, it ended a lot of the torture that was happening to Vietnamese prisoners under the American watch. Fast forward a few years, Senator Harkin gets elected to the Senate. He got elected to the House, and then eventually got elected to the Senate. Fast forward a lot more years, he runs for president. Fast forward some more, he doesn't get it. And then he becomes my boss. And when I worked for Senator Harkin, he was the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. So I joined his staff as an unpaid, again, go figure, an unpaid intern working on the education policy staff for the House Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, working especially on the for-profit college investigation, on rights for students with disabilities, and on, basically whatever else they wanted the interns to do that day, clipping news clips and running meetings. But the strongest memory I have of that internship was Senator Harkin taking me to the Senate floor. See, he had this program where he would take a small group of his interns, as often as he could, to the actual floor of the Senate. And to get privileges on the floor, the senator has to actually ask for permission to let them on the Senate floor. And so if you go back and you look in the congressional record for that day, you can see the chair recognizes Senator Harkin, and Senator Harkin asks the Senate for unanimous permission to allow his staff, Jimmy Fremgen, floor privileges for that day.
I ask in the consent that Lauren Boyer and Jimmy Fremgen of my staff be granted floor privileges for the duration of today's session.
Without objection.
It was the first time, and as far as I know, the only time that my name has ever been in the formal congressional record. And it was huge. That day, it meant that I had like the keys to the castle. I got to go and sit on the Senate floor and watch whoever was on there, talking about whatever they were talking about. And to me, it didn't matter. I just wanted to be there. I just wanted to watch. And I did. So I did my work that day, and I kept asking my supervisor if I could go back. So I sat on the corner. There were these benches in the back corner on the staff benches and just watched. And I remember sitting, they're separated. Democrats have their own benches for staff and Republicans have their own benches for staff. And I remember sitting in the back corner and watching Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio give a speech. And he was like, I don't know, as far away as that broom is. And he was rocking back and forth on his heels as he gave this speech. And I just remember thinking, like, is he nervous? And it brought out this like human side of it. And so it was just really, really cool and really interesting. So anyway, a few months later, my internship ended with Senator Harkin. We got a chance to take this picture. He was really nice, really cool. He signed it. He said, "To Jimmy, with my thanks and best wishes, your Senator, Tom Harkin," which was hilarious because I had only been to Iowa for like 24 hours at that point. But you know what? I liked him, so I kept it. I framed it. So a few months later, still looking for a full-time paid job on Capitol Hill, I went and started just applying for jobs. Just applying for jobs as often as I could. I networked. I went and met with as many people as I possibly could. And one day, I went to visit the office of Congressman Elijah Cummings. I had applied for a job in his office as a legislative assistant. At this point, I felt like I had leveled up enough that I was qualified for it. I had applied online, sent in my resume, my writing sample, my cover letter, all that kind of stuff. I figured that it would probably get buried in the pile. So on a day where the House was not in session, I walked in wearing a suit. I think I was wearing this suit. I think that was the only suit I had at the time, actually. Now I have more than that. But I walked in wearing a suit, and in the front office there were two women, one sitting behind the desk and one just like standing there leaning against the desk. I figured she was a constituent hanging out or somebody like a lobbyist visiting or something. So I turned to the woman behind the desk and I said, "Hi, my name's Jimmy Fremgen, and I applied for the job that you have posted as legislative assistant. And I wanted to come in and I wanted to bring, and I had a copy of my resume, my cover letter, all the writing samples, and a proposal for passing a bill within his jurisdiction. I think it was on postal services." And I said, "I know that things can get lost, but I wanted to bring this by and, hopefully add it to the top of the pile and maybe meet with your legislative director." Now, the legislative director is the person in charge of the legislative staff, and they're usually the one that's in charge of the interviews, and I knew that this person was because that's who I'd addressed my cover letter to. So the other woman in the office slowly turns around and she goes, "Well, that's me, but I don't do walk-ins." So my heart just dropped into my shoes, and I thought to myself, crap. And she said, "But I'll take your stuff and I'll put it on the pile. Thanks for coming in." It's like, okay, well, it's really nice to meet you. I hope that I have a chance to talk to you again. And I turned around and I left. I remember walking out in the hallway and thinking, didn't get that one. And walking off and just kind of moving on to the next thing. Well, a couple hours later, Trudy Perkins, Mr. Cummings' communications director, called me and she said, "Hi, this is Jimmy. I want you to come in for an interview tomorrow." And I thought, oh my God, it worked. So I spent the rest of the night cramming for the interview, taking notes, learning everything I could about the 7th District of Maryland before I had the interview the next morning at 8:30 in the morning. The next day I came in and there was the legislative director. Her name's Lucinda, and Trudy sitting there at the table, and we sit down and they just kind of talked to each other. They just seemed like they were having a good time, and like it was fun to hang out with them, but I didn't really feel like I did anything. I didn't really feel like I impressed anybody or I had accomplished anything because it just seemed like they were hanging out. So again, I walked out and I thought to myself, well, I'm not getting that job. And then I moved on. So I applied for a few more jobs, and like a week later, I think, my phone rings again. It's Trudy. Hey, Jimmy, I want to know if you will come in and meet with the Congressman tomorrow. At this point, it had been almost 8 months. No, you know what? 9 months of me working on Capitol Hill for free. I was ready to take anything. And even though I knew something about Elijah Cummings, I'd studied him and I'd paid enough attention, I didn't know who he was going to become. I just really wanted a job. And so I said, no problem. What time do you want me there? 8:30 in the morning. No problem. I'll be there. So the next day I show up at 8:20. I remember an old teacher telling me that he used to show up to interviews 20 minutes early so that he could like wipe the sweat off his forehead, take some deep breaths, relax. And so I showed up like hella early. I walk in, I sit on the couch, this really low leather couch that sat in the front office, and I waited. And I waited. And I waited. Until after what felt like a century, and I think was like more like 30 minutes, Congressman Cummings just like burst through the door and said, "All right, man, let's go," in this big gruff voice that he had. So we went into the office, sat down, and we then talked for an hour straight. And we talked about everything except my qualifications. We talked about all the things that you're not allowed to talk about in job interviews. He asked me about my romantic life. He asked me about my faith. He asked me about my health. He asked me about my family. And it was a powerful conversation where I got to share with him about my health history. I got to talk to him about being a teacher. I got to talk to him about the things that made me tick. But at no point did I actually share anything, I felt like, about my qualifications, about the things that I had done, the professional things I had accomplished. And after a while, I walked out of the office and he said, "All right, thanks for coming in. I gotta go." He may not even have thanked me. It would have been super normal for him not to thank me and just to say, "I gotta go." I walked out again thinking that was one of the best conversations I've ever had in my life, and there is absolutely no way I'm getting that job. But that's the kind of person I want to work for. So 2 weeks goes by, I'm moving, and my phone rings. I've got a box in my arms, and I pick it up, and it's this voice on the other end. "Jimmy, this is Elijah Cummings." I'm like, oh my... It's not a phone call you expect to get. And he says, "I'm going to offer you the job, but I want you to know up front, I'm paying you $50,000, your salary's non-negotiable, your benefits are non-negotiable, and I want you to start on Monday. Do you accept?" "Yes, Congressman. Of course I accept. But I'm in the middle of moving. Do you mind if I see you on Tuesday?" "All right, fine. I'll see you then. My chief of staff will call you." Click. And that's how I got hired on Capitol Hill. It took me 9 months, December of 2011 to August of 2012. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. To get hired. Well, to get hired with a job that I could cash the checks. And it ended up being 3.5 years of the most intense, most draining, exhausting, frustrating experiences of my life. But it changed who I was forever. And I got the chance to work with someone who turned out to be one of the most significant influences in my life, and somebody who made me who I am. Other than my parents, my Nana, and probably Mr. Horner, my 11th grade U.S. history teacher, this man probably contributed more than anyone else to who I am as an adult. So that's it. That's the story. I realized I had never told that story before. People ask me about it all the time, and I figured, why not? So I'm gonna go back to packing, or unpacking. And I'll see you soon.